Every salt explained. Salt might be the only ingredient on Earth that people simultaneously take completely for granted and pay $12 for a tiny jar of. It sits on every table, dumped into every recipe without a second thought. And yet somewhere along the way, it also became a wellness trend, with entire aisles now devoted to pink crystals, gray flakes, and salt that costs more per ounce than the steak it's seasoning. Here's the part nobody mentions. Nearly all salt on Earth starts out the exact same way, as sodium chloride, either mined from ancient seabeds that dried up millions of years ago or evaporated straight out of today's ocean. The differences come down to where it's harvested, how it's processed, and what tags along for the ride. Trace minerals, moisture, the occasional ancient microbe. That's the whole story in one sentence. So let's get properly salty about it. Table salt. Table salt is the heavily refined version, mined or evaporated and stripped down until it's almost pure sodium chloride, with anti-caking agents added so it doesn't clump and iodine added on purpose, a genuinely brilliant 20th century public health move that all but eliminated iodine deficiency goiters across entire countries. Nutritionally, it's mostly sodium doing sodium things, which your body needs in small amounts for fluid balance and nerve function. But the fine grain size makes it disproportionately easy to overdo, since a teaspoon packs in more sodium by volume than the same teaspoon of a flakier salt. It's the reliable, unglamorous workhorse that gets zero social media attention and does 90% of the actual seasoning in most kitchens anyway. Kosher salt. Kosher salt isn't blessed by anyone. It's named for its original job, drawing blood out of meat during the koshering process. And its large, irregular flakes are the whole point. Easy to pinch, easy to see, and predictable to cook with. It typically skips the iodine and anti-caking additives, giving it a cleaner flavor, and health-wise, it's essentially interchangeable with table salt gram for gram. Though bigger crystals mean a pinch delivers meaningfully less sodium than the same pinch of the fine stuff. It's less a health food and more a texture upgrade that wandered into the seasoning conversation. Sea salt. Sea salt is evaporated straight from ocean water, and depending on the source, it can carry small amounts of trace minerals like magnesium, calcium, and potassium, which is genuinely true and also wildly overstated by marketing copy, since the quantities are tiny enough that you'd need to eat an unreasonable amount of salt for any real nutritional benefit. What it does offer, honestly, is flavor complexity and crunch, plus the vague but not entirely fake satisfaction of knowing it came from actual seawater instead of a mine that used to be seawater. It's the middle child of the salt world. Perfectly nice, slightly overhyped, still invited to every dinner party. Himalayan pink salt. Mined from ancient seabeds in Pakistan, Himalayan pink salt gets its blush color from trace iron oxide, essentially tiny amounts of rust, and it has built an enormous wellness reputation around trace minerals like potassium, magnesium, and calcium. Though once again, the quantities are small enough that a handful of almonds beats a spoonful of pink salt if minerals are the actual goal. Where it does deliver is flavor and presentation. Milder than table salt, with a color that photographs beautifully, which might be the real reason it conquered Instagram before it conquered anyone's health regimen. Celtic sea salt. Now here's the one worth actually slowing down for. Celtic sea salt, sometimes labeled sel gris or grey salt, is hand-harvested from tidal ponds along the coast of Brittany, France, using traditional wooden rakes in a method that hasn't changed much in centuries, and it's left unrefined and unwashed, which is exactly why it carries genuinely higher concentrations of trace minerals than most salts on this list, including meaningful amounts of magnesium, potassium, calcium, and zinc, alongside natural moisture that gives it a damp, chunky texture and a distinctive gray color from the clay-lined ponds it's harvested in. That magnesium content in particular has earned it real attention in nutrition circles, since magnesium supports muscle and nerve function, blood sugar regulation, and blood pressure control, areas where a lot of modern diets genuinely run short. Because it's unrefined, it also carries a noticeably lower sodium concentration by weight than heavily processed table salt, meaning more actual flavor and mineral content per pinch, alongside comparatively less pure sodium chloride. It's the closest thing on this list to an actual health halo, and unlike most trendy salts, it might have earned it. Basically, the salt equivalent of that one friend who's effortlessly good at everything and still somehow humble about it. Fleur de sel. Skimmed by hand off the very top of those same French salt ponds before it even sinks to become Celtic sea salt, Fleur de sel is delicate, expensive, and genuinely limited in supply, since weather conditions have to be just right for it to form at all. It shares a similar trace mineral profile with its grittier cousin, but in a finer crystal, traditionally used as a finishing salt sprinkled on right before serving, since heat would waste its texture. It's the salt equivalent of a garnish that costs more than the entree. Black salt. Kala namak, or black salt, is a fermented volcanic salt popular across South Asian cooking, and it owes its famously pungent, egg-like aroma to naturally occurring sulfur compounds formed during processing. It's a favorite in vegan cooking specifically because that eggy smell makes it a convincing stand-in for real eggs in dishes like tofu scrambles, and it carries modest amounts of iron alongside its sodium, though nobody's reaching for it primarily for the nutrition. Smoked salt. Smoked salt is exactly what it sounds like. Salt slowly smoked over wood until it absorbs a deep, campfire-adjacent flavor. And nutritionally, it behaves almost identically to whatever base salt was smoked in the first place. It exists purely for flavor, and it delivers, turning simple dishes into something that tastes like it spent all day next to a barbecue pit, even when it didn't. So which salt should actually end up in your kitchen? Realistically, almost every major health organization, including the American Heart Association, lands on the same core advice regardless of which fancy label is on the container. Total sodium intake matters far more than which specific salt delivers it. And most people, salt snobs included, are still eating more sodium than recommended, mostly from processed and restaurant food, rather than the pinch-out of any particular jar. That said, if trace minerals and genuine unrefined character matter to you, Celtic sea salt is a legitimately smart pick, not just marketing dressed up as science, while table salt remains the practical, budget-friendly choice that still gets the iodine job done. Every salt on this list tells the same basic chemistry story, sodium and chloride locked together, just harvested differently, processed differently, and marketed with wildly different levels of enthusiasm. From a mine that used to be an ocean to a wooden rake pulling gray crystals out of a French tidal pond, salt covers just as much ground as cheese, tea, potatoes, rice, mushrooms, and spices ever did. People who actually learn where their seasoning came from instead of just grabbing the nearest shaker tend to notice something interesting. It all started in the same ocean. Some of it just took a much longer, fancier route to your plate.